Welcome to episode 6 of the Snobcast. Today, we will be discussing the Dark Knight Trilogy. As always, this conversation will contain spoilers. We will be discussing these movies from beginning to end.
Ah, yes! I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit? Oh, your body!
Alright, welcome to the Snobcast. Today I'm here with my fellow snobs, Steve.
Hello.
David.
Ew.
And Joseph.
Hello.
Alright, so why are we talking about the Dark Knight Trilogy? I feel like it's out on home video. That means it's over, it's done, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in this context, you can kind of see it from the beginning. Actually, that would be kind of interesting, like to just have no clue and not see them in the theaters or anything like that, and just kind of watch them as a complete whole story.
Is that how you think they're meant to be viewed?
I think now, I mean, there was kind of a decision that was made, it seems like, with the third one, like either we're going to do an individual story or it's going to tell one big story and this is going to end it so nobody can kind of take over this at the end. And that's what they decided to do, you know, instead of just having something totally on its own after the origin story and everything.
Because it really feels like the first one can kind of exist on its own.
Yep, and definitely Dark Knight, right?
Yeah, there didn't need to be a sequel, but there was. I mean, they had that Joker thing at the end, but that could have gone anywhere, you know.
Yeah, the Joker card at the end of Batman Begins in particular feels like kind of a nod to the fans, like, oh, great, you know, like this is you could just imagine what the sequel would be, even if there wasn't a sequel.
The card means he's officially Batman now, because now he's going to tangle with the Joker.
Right, like the ultimate Batman supervillain, right?
Well, let's talk about a little bit about Batman Begins. Do you guys remember seeing that for the first time? I mean, did you like it? Do you still like it?
I loved it when I first saw it. I still love it right now. I think it's the best of all three Batmans, to be honest.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
The reason why is because it really sticks to a theme, which is the theme of fear. And it keeps reinforcing that theme again and again and again. It identifies fear. It addresses fear. It addresses what it is. It addresses what it does in people's lives and how to conquer it. The Dark Knight feels like a direct sequel to Batman Begins, but The Dark Knight Rises feels more like it's thematically following Batman Begins in terms of the fear thing. With the third installment, The Dark Knight Rises, it deals with the fear theme again, but it feels like Nolan wanted to take it in a different direction. That it's not so much about conquering fear; it's about how that fear is necessary. Because ultimately, it's kind of reinforced by that. Is he blind? I can't remember. Is it the blind guy?
Yeah.
It's kind of reinforced that you need the fear to get you out of the hole, because there's a metaphor going on with this hole, this deep pit that you've got to climb your way out of. So, yeah, it feels more like it's more like a thematic sequel to Batman Begins, because the first one is about conquering your fear, and then the third one's about why fear is necessary in your life.
And all the stuff with Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows, it really feels like it could jump from the first one to the last one.
Yeah. And, you know, Batman, the Dark Knight, the one with the Joker, is just, it feels more like just a studio sequel to the first one. It's bigger, it's got cool stuff going on, it's got IMAX, it's got, you know, a lot of spectacle to it.
Well, I feel like that was really when Christopher Nolan got more control, right? Because the first one was successful and they let him do more what he wanted in the second one, and that's when it got all blue and sleek and like that got that more Christopher Nolan style to it.
It seems like there was still kind of more of an emphasis on having, in spite of the fact that it's supposed to be more realistic, like Bruce Wayne is a human being and da-da-da, it seems like there was an emphasis to make Gotham in particular more fantasy-like. When you think about all like the smoke, like since so much of it took place in a very specific area in Gotham, mostly like the Narrows and everything like that, has a very specific look with all the smoke and the rain and everything like that. The first one doesn't look anything like the other two, which I think is really kind of interesting. Gotham kind of looks totally different in each movie to suit the needs of the story, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you think that was because somebody was telling him like it has to look like sort of like the Tim Burton movies?
Oh, in terms of Batman Begins? Yeah, I think so. I think they wanted there to be some continuity to it, where it's kind of like, oh, you know, you can do this, but don't go too far. And that's what I think is so interesting with these comic book movies, is that the studio seems to be like, maybe it just comes down to them being like, well, this was successful before, so we got to kind of do it again. But there's not a lot of people reinventing too much with these properties. It's kind of like, well, this is what we've done before. Do a variation of that, right? Even in terms of like the humor and stuff like that, in the Dark Knight trilogy, it's all pretty much summer movie type of moments, right? Where it's like where the crowd is supposed to go, yeah, you know, like it's that type of thing. The type of stuff that's also like in the Lord of the Rings movies, where it's you're getting the audience on their feet.
I feel like the first one, is a little more, what do you want to say, like cookie cutter style. Although it does spend a lot of time with that introduction. You don't see Batman for a while.
That's probably, I think that's why the argument could be made that it is the most interesting, because it's always more interesting creating something than being something.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like The Dark Knight has the advantage of not having that weight of creating Batman. It's kind of like, this is a story. Like, here we go. Like, this is just a straight thriller. There's a lot of thematic ideas to it, but it doesn't have to spend half an hour saying like, all right, there's this guy in a bath suit. Oh yeah, he's rich and he has like all these gadgets, and yeah, he's really bummed out about his parents dying, and like, you know, it doesn't have that thing. Whereas that's the whole point of Batman Begins, is to kind of have Bruce Wayne be a character and stumble around and figure out, right? Like he doesn't.
I think The Dark Knight. I think Batman Begins is ultimately successful because they've done Nolan did such a good job at positioning the audience to sympathize with a man who's supposed to be one of the richest men in the world or something like that. He's supposed to be an aristocrat, and usually it's hard to get an audience to sympathize with a guy who's just really fucking rich. So, you know, it's necessary to really bring Bruce Wayne down to size and see him climbing mountains and stuff like that, and go through hardships and be a petty thief in the marketplace and be chased around by Asian guys in military outfits or something like that. And so, and to see him in prison with a beard and in a dungeon. So it helps make us, it helps position us as an audience member to sympathize with him. And so when he goes back to being Bruce Wayne, helping the girl put the thing, we're on his side. We're like, oh, fucking rich asshole. You know?
It really emphasizes the idea that like the Batman image and idea had to be cultivated. Like he had to go away and really kind of recreate himself in the most literal way in order to kind of like it wasn't kind of the original idea of Batman as he was sitting in his mansion and he was like, wait, bats are scary.
Yeah.
I can dress up like one and scare people. You know, it's like everything has a logical idea behind it.
Well, I think that's what kind of drew us and like maybe the studios and everybody to the idea of the prequel, not the prequel, drew everyone to the idea of Batman Begins, because it is the origin story, and that hasn't really been seen on film. Like the Tim Burton movies and the Joel Schumacher movies had like flashbacks to his parents getting killed, but we didn't really see his training or how he became Batman. So that was kind of the lure for everybody.
Yeah.
For me, it was. And
yeah, I think because I remember when they were planning this after Batman and Robin, they were kind of talking about, oh, you know, we're going to make it, you know, darker. We're going to go back to da-da-da-da. We're going to do Batman Year One, I think was the original thing. Like, I don't know if you remember that, where it was like supposed to be Darren Aronofsky was supposed to direct this Batman Year One black and white movie. And it's like, oh, wow. You know, like that would be...
What period was it supposed to take place in?
It was supposed to be modern, I think.
Oh, because I was thinking, man, bringing Batman back to the 40s
would be great.
With the old cars and Tommy guns and fedoras and trench coats and those...
I kind of feel like that's the only way that Superman can work in this day and age.
Yeah.
But that would be
because otherwise Superman's got to fight like cruise missiles and satellites and stuff, and that's not as interesting.
But I mean, just the idea of truth, justice in the American way. Like, not only that aside, but I think that would be a way where you could get around doing like a World's Finest type movie where you do have Batman in a cloth suit and Superman in a cloth suit like team up, like have something like that would make sense. But nowadays it's just that would just seem really weird.
I'd really like to see a movie with Batman in a cloth suit. I'd like to see them try to pull that off these days.
Yeah. I that would be really interesting. I mean, you'd kind of have to create a world in which that would make sense. That's ultimately what this is about. I think if you have to sum up like the idea of the Dark Knight trilogy is the treatment of this character and idea as real as possible for the most part. Dark Knight Rises might go a little bit more comic booky in some aspects, but it's Bruce Wayne is a real person with a psychology, limitless money at his disposal. Can he make this thing work? Like, if he's really being motivated that much by his parents' death and the idea of stopping crime, like, can it be done?
It helps. First of all, we wonder, like, you know, his parents dying is part of why he wants to be Batman, but We understand his investment in wanting to help the city because there's a part in Batman Begins where we meet his father on the train, and his father had a definite investment in wanting to help Gotham City, and he's carrying on his father's legacy of this sort of benevolent corporation, except he's doing it more directly as Batman. So that kind of answers, well, why does he want to help Gotham City so much if he's just wanted to avenge his parents' death? And
right.
Batman isn't just a good guy because that's what the story expects of him. We can actually understand the psychology of why he wants to help Gotham City.
What is motivating him?
Right,
yeah, which is something
right.
that's not necessary in the previous Batman movies. It's just kind of, he exists, and this is why he exists,
Yeah.
but why he does it day to day isn't really addressed. They don't really have the opportunity to go into the Nolan movies, the Dark Knight trilogy movies, but you kind of, in the comics, you have an idea that the Wayne family has this kind of heritage of helping out Gotham City. Like there were judges in his family, and basically there's a history of philanthropy, and this is kind of his way with this corrupt cop force and everything like that he can help out with the city too. Mm-hmm. It's like, so that totally fits in with that idea too. It's just in a different way.
Well, I was just gonna relate back to what Jeff was saying. Is I think the only way we'll see a cloth Batman is if they kind of get away from this brawler persona.
Yeah.
To more of like the detective.
Right.
Less fight scenes, more sneaking around in the shadows.
And that would definitely work. It'd be kind of a way to, because that's also a big part of the character, right? Is because there is a Bruce Wayne also that is literally a genius, right? Like, I think that's kind of
super genius.
That's kind of the Batman animated series Batman, where he's kind of like always ahead.
And even most of the comics.
Yeah, he's always kind of ahead of most of these criminals. He might be outmatched physically sometimes and need gadgets and things like that, but he usually kind of knows what's going on. He sizes people up pretty quick.
And that's what's different about this Batman, is that we see him from the beginning, and we're seeing like every new battle he's facing. There's nothing off camera. It's when he fights the Joker, that's the first time he's fighting the Joker. So I guess it makes some sense in the Christopher Nolan movies that he's a little bit behind, because he's always learning. But a lot of people complain that that's not Batman. He should be like a genius detective right from the beginning.
I don't think it would have worked. Not in the idea of him being just an average person. It kind of gives you a sort of investment where he's kind of struggling to keep up with these people that are crazily ahead of him. Like the Joker's always 7 steps ahead of him in The Dark Knight. Like the plans are so convoluted. And cinematically, it's great, but like when you think about it, it's like, well, how would anybody arrange all of these things?
Yeah, what if one little thing didn't happen the way it was supposed to? But
yeah,
that's just one of those things where you just say, oh, it's a movie, so you go ahead and let it go.
Ultimately, The Dark Knight's a thriller.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we can definitely pick apart The Dark Knight a little bit more.
Sure, you can.
But
I'm pretty sure it's been done enough times to where everyone else is kind of sick of hearing about how you can deconstruct The Dark Knight. But The Dark Knight ultimately succeeds in terms of the spectacle and Heath Ledger's performance and Nolan's direction, and so you just kind of have to just go ahead and be swept up in it.
Well, it's such a great representation of the two characters. I mean, there's a reason why they're kind of regarded so highly as, these great rivals.
Yeah.
It totally dissects that in a great way.
No two hero and villain have been so intertwined as Batman and the Joker.
Yeah, they're
because
literal
you
opposites.
Basically have one guy who has a sense of morals and order versus another guy who has no morals and order, and what the guy who has no morals and order wants to do is to prove to the one who has morals and order that your morals and order are bullshit. All you gotta do is just pull out a few strings and just watch your world turn upside down and just basically unravel everything that you believe in front of you. So that's why I think the Joker is such a great villain. I think the Joker is one of the reasons why I love the Joker so much, and the reason why, even though I think Batman Begins is a superior movie, the Joker is the best villain, is because the Joker is on this really high, like Darth Vader level villain, because his job is not to kill you. His job is to turn you to the dark side, and he will demonstrate why your order and your morals are bullshit to get your mind go straight, and he even does it to Harvey Dent, turning him into Two-Face. And that's part of what the discussion is in the interrogation room between him and Batman. He's just like, you and I are the same. You're just on this position right now, but when the chips are down, these people will eat each other. And he says, you're just a freak like me. And he I forget what else he says. He says something about like, all you need to do is just change a few things, and you're right there with me. You're just another nut.
That's ultimately, yeah. That's what's driving him, is to kind of prove that to him. That's what I thought was so interesting about Batman Begins, is it's the first time that Ra's al Ghul and the Scarecrow were in a movie. Those were both characters that didn't have to be revamped. This was kind of the first time you were seeing them in a DC movie. So that was really kind of interesting to see how that worked. Because Ra's al Ghul is probably one of the last characters since the inception of the Batman character that's really kind of stuck around and been interesting.
And to pick those characters for this like reboot,
Yeah,
like new series, and not go with the Joker right away.
that was really gutsy.
Or the Riddler,
Exactly.
or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that was really gutsy. So that also, it's regular movie going audiences don't have a reference for those characters, so they can kind of see them fresh. I'm sure that's probably why they did it. But yeah, they got it to work, these two characters, because you could imagine that the Scarecrow done wrong would be pretty easy to do. The guy with a sack on his head, But,
Well, they both work thematically.
Yeah.
Because Ra's al Ghul has the plant that you can get the fear drug from, and the Scarecrow is supposed to be fear incarnate, which you can use it from. So they both work together. They managed to make these two characters work, for the story, and that's why they both ultimately succeed. It's not about whether they're recognizable or not.
That's what's interesting too, is that starting right from square one, right in Batman Begins, he's already facing these international supervillains.
Yeah.
Which there is a part of Batman Begins where he's kind of taking on the local, crime syndicate, but I think that in of itself is enough of a. That could be the cloth Batman.
Yeah,
suit.
just the mafia, basically.
That's what I was kind of hoping for with a year one type thing, where he's just taking on small time hoods and muggers, and then working up to maybe the crime boss behind them. Like that in of itself is an interesting movie, because it's just a guy in a suit trying to get things right again.
In Batman, well, also what's cool is that in Batman Begins, they reinforce how corrupt Gotham City is, and Batman is necessary for Gotham City because all the cops are bought out by the mafia. So that's why Batman can circumvent that corruption and get right directly to administering justice.
It's kind of justifying a vigilante.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like cinematically, there's a lot of like shots of the slums and like bums around fire barrels and stuff like that, and they get rid of all that in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Like they set it up in the first one, and they're like, yeah, that's there.
Oh yeah, no, and what's interesting is that Batman is necessary in Batman Begins because he's circumventing the corruption that the cops are brought up by. The only good one is Gordon, and it's, remember that fat guy who's, the fat guy who buys like a falafel and he robs that guy, and then he says something to Gordon like, "You're not going to tell me, are you?" And then Gordon says, "Well, in a city this bent, who am I going to talk to?"
Right.
So they also isolated Gordon as the one good guy, and that's why Batman and Gordon work well together. And he cleans up the city pretty well by the time the Dark Knight comes around. Now, the reason why Batman is still necessary is because of his technology. He can take care of things that the police still can't, because we have this super duper villain, the Joker, we have to deal with.
They're totally outmatched against something like the Joker, which
Exactly.
he has his own syndicate at his
Yeah.
disposal, where it's not even about money or anything. It's about these little schemes that he has.
Mm-hmm.
So
But I mean, they really need Batman's technology to stop the mob, though, to stop their money.
that was a pretty big aspect of Begins, actually. Is kind of like, and how the mob would get so desperate as to want to work with somebody like the Joker.
Exactly.
Like why they would
and
be
when
in that
you
position.
when you look at it as a trilogy, that movie really is about the mob's money, not about the Joker.
Right.
Well, what I also think is really cool is that we're also visiting China. And one of the things about the part with China, the reason why I also think it's kind of cool is because they did that CIA skyhook thing, which I loved, and I was kind of disappointed that we kind of veered from that kind of grounded in some sort of reality thing in The Dark Knight Rises, because we're not doing skyhook. He has a super plane,
Yeah.
Because I thought that skyhook thing was cool because it showed that, he has like this amazing technology, but he's still limited. He's not quite...
He's using things that more or less really exist.
He's
Something
still
a little more
limited to
practical.
reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I'm sure that plane in The Dark Knight Rises is probably based on something, but we've never heard of it, and it's really far out there. So yeah, it is more fantastical than like the realistic technology that's already been used with this guy.
But I also really like that Bruce Wayne is like, oh, that exists. Get me one.
Yeah.
Like he's so rich that he's just able to be like, I'll take one in black.
Yeah. That's kind of a big part of this character, this version of the character, where it's that's also a kind of a revamp on the character as well. Is he's not only just the genius and the super scientist and stuff like this comes up with this stuff himself. He has a network of people. Alfred runs the manor, and then Lucius Fox kind of helps him get his gear and get everything together, so he doesn't just get he doesn't just get shot in the face right away. It's a network. That's kind of a difference, I think, from the previous versions of Batman, even like the Tim Burton ones.
So let's talk a little bit about just like the basic story of these movies. I mean, now that we're at the end, does it all kind of come together, do you think, as one nice package, or do you feel like each movie is sort of its own story that they've kind of clumped together with the end of the third one?
I think the first movie and the third movie are like hands and gloves. I think thematically those two relate the most.
So is that
but the second movie is the best movie, but it's sort of is sticking out.
So is this like in comics when like they'll have a different writer and artist team? It's like, oh, they wrote issues 6 through 12,
right?
And then they brought the other guys back on for the remaining 6. It kind of feels like that sometimes.
To me, they feel like 3 individual movies. I don't think they fit together as a whole trilogy as well as, like, say, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And part of it's because of the absence of Heath Ledger. He definitely should have been in the third Batman, and they did they made the right decision by not addressing the Joker. They didn't. Not once did they go, "Good thing Joker's in prison" or something like that, or have a guy like fill in for him like the same way that Maggie Gyllenhaal did for Katie Holmes. So that was the right thing to do.
But their silence was almost kind of deafening, don't you think? Where it was kind of like nobody mentioned, even with everybody else showing up.
Why, when Bane is unleashing anarchy on Gotham, why isn't the Joker coming like, into the city?
You would think that he's like, hey, this guy's honing in on my market. Like, this is what I do. So it seems like he would have an opinion about it.
Yeah, I mean, imagine what a different movie it would have been. Do you think they would have included the Joker? I mean,
definitely. Oh, definitely. He would have been in on the streets and having fun, and yeah.
Do you think they would still have had Bane, or would have Joker been the main villain, or one of the other villains? Or
I think he probably might have been one of the other villains, maybe.
I think he probably would have
really
been. I think he would have been Scarecrow in the chair.
Yeah.
Judging people.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Because even if it's just like a cameo like that, like, man, what a juicy part. That would be so great to see. And that would also kind of help, thread them all together. But, there was a definite decision made, I think. Because you get the impression that there's not much time between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. You kind of have a feeling like it's pretty soon after, right?
Yeah. But about, like, the Joker being in the third one, I feel like he was such a big character in the second movie, and he was like Batman's foil, like to have him just show up in a cameo in the third one would be kind of weird, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't necessarily need to see him. What if it was just like some of his goons or something like that with those masks? Like once they let Blackgate out or whatever, it's like these people that are under their own orders, like it's some sort of reference to him. I don't think you have to have somebody dress up and do a Heath Ledger impression, but some sort of mention I think you could have gotten away with.
I mean, even if Heath Ledger was alive and they just wanted to continue that story.
Okay.
Wouldn't it still have to be a major part, because Joker was such a big part of Batman's life and Batman's evolution,
Ultimately, I think why Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises fit so well together, it kind of has the sequelitis kind of thing, like Death Star 2 and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It kind of has that feel. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's like these are so dependent on each other. In order to make sense of it, you kind of have to know the other ones, I don't know if that... but you can't totally cut out the Dark Knight, because there's so many important things character-wise that happen in the Dark Knight that lead up to...
Yeah.
That lead up to the third, so...
Well, The Dark Knight is where Bruce loses the love of his life, right? And that's got to do something.
I mean, isn't it really still about order versus chaos?
I don't know. You see, the thing is that the Joker, he does plan. He's a planner. He's a schemer. That's all he ever did in the entire movie was scheme and plan.
He had the best plans.
Yeah, and so I don't know if it's so much about order and chaos. I mean,
But I think that's
It's
what he was
like-
supposed to represent.
I suppose he was supposed to represent that, but I think it's more of just the theme of the Dark Knight is questioning what is the fabric that holds our society together? What is it? What is that? What is that fabric that holds society together? What happens when we take away a few parts and see what happens? You know?
It's also
which is going from order to chaos.
right. I think it's also the idea of what is a hero, because there's this comparison between Harvey Dent and the
Right.
idea of the vigilante in a crazy costume.
Right.
They're constantly playing upon that idea and protecting the idea of the human hero in Harvey Dent, even though he ended up being a murderer, basically.
What is The Dark Knight Rises about, really? I would like to think it's about that hole metaphor, about getting yourself out of a hole
It
that
is.
you're in.
It
At the
is.
same time, it gets distracted with all these other sort of things going on, and it doesn't reinforce that theme as well as Batman Begins did, because everything was just fear constantly. They even talk about Falcone. Falcone uses fear to control the city, and even he's basically spoon feeding the theme to the audience when he holds that gun up to Bruce Wayne. He says like, "I shoot you right
Yeah.
here," and there's a judge, there's a cop right here, but that's the power of fear.
Yeah.
You know, again, reinforcing that, and they didn't seem so much to do that. And I guess the reason why I'm kind of disappointed in The Dark Knight Rises about getting distracted by all these other things is that I really would have liked to see more of Bruce in the hole. I kind of wish we spent more time in the hole, and then his triumph of getting out the hole being more triumphant by spending more time trying to get out of there. But we kind of montage our way.
But are these movies about Bruce and Batman, or are they about Gotham?
You know, The Dark Knight feels more like it's about Gotham than Bruce Wayne, doesn't it? This is more about what's at stake with Gotham City.
Sure.
We spend so much
Because-
time with those two boats
But-
and seeing
but-
if they're going to blow each other
Yeah,
up.
but then in The Dark Knight Rises, there's so little Batman on the screen. There's
That's
a
true.
ton of Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Gordon running around trying to control the city. It's all about, and Talia wants to basically make the city start devouring itself before she just destroys it.
Yeah, but
And,
those are all like little points of interest things that are happening, and they're not part of a central theme that it's trying to reinforce. You know, like the hole and the guy talking about how you need fear to get out of the hole. Those moments with him in the hole, the guy talking about you need the fear. You don't use the rope because you need the fear of not making it to make you finally make it. Those little moments are really great for, if looking for a central theme, but those parts are so small, it's not enough to carry across the beginning and the end and stuff like
I
that.
think that's because ultimately these three movies have so much plot. There's
Yeah.
so much plot in
Yeah.
all of. There's no time to even like address humor in the movie. Like there's humor in the
Yeah.
movies, but it's just like they're so relentlessly paced, and there's really no room for that kind of character or idea. You kind of have these ideas that you can kind of bridge together loosely. Just like the whole is basically a non-sci-fi reworking of the Lazarus Pit, and like okay, we're supposed to know that, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And Bane is really reworked in this real world way where it's like, okay, he's not this huge luchador on steroids or whatever, but he's somebody that basically had to be self-made, kind of in a way that Bruce didn't have to be. Like Bruce, I think from Bane's perspective, had everything handed to him.
Yeah.
So he kind of has to relive what created Bane in a weird way. I think that's a pretty constant thing in a lot of Batman's universe, where it's like this thing that's a small aspect of Bruce Wayne is an obsession of this major villain, right? Like in Batman Begins, Scarecrow uses fear, synthetically induced, right? And Batman creates fear in criminals. He uses that same thing in a different way. All the technology that the Joker produces for chaos, Batman produces that to try to prevent him, and I think that's the same thing in Dark Knight Rises, where it's like it's not just Bane's might that's going to be able to keep him down. It's like he'll come back, like he has a purpose.
And that's what bugged me about the way they kind of did that whole, like Steve was saying earlier, he wishes there was more, because that's his whole, like, that's the Dark Knight Rising, is him coming out of that hole. And like it is sort of like a montage. Like he did a couple sit-ups, he did some pull-ups, and then he climbed out of the hole. Like,
yeah. He managed to get all the prisoners on his side to go, let's get out there.
Maybe
Yeah.
they just want anybody to escape. I think that's kind of implied. It's like anybody that's thrown down here, it's like that's just the dream. Is like you're given the opportunity to get out if you can. but nobody has really, except this mythical person that they talk about, right?
And that's the hope and the despair and all that stuff that Bane talks about.
And that's exactly what's motivating Bane. Yeah. Actually, talking about what's motivating Bane, that's what I think is kind of interesting. Seeing again, like, what is Bane's?
That's not motivating Bane at all.
Yeah, what is Bane's motivation? So after all of the storytelling judo, that's like the last 15 minutes of Dark Knight Rises. Like, I'm really confused about where Bane actually fits into the story in terms of why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, because when you get to the end, you're like, oh, he was just a puppet?
He was a guy.
But was he a puppet who was also kind of allowed to do his own thing, which was like this whole idea of torturing Gotham and torturing Batman? And was that part of the plan, or was that just Bane's like, oh, let him go do his thing?
Or was it because Talia was like, no, this is what we're going to do because he killed my pop-pop. My pap-pap's dead.
And that's what it seems like. It doesn't seem like Bane would actually hold any allegiance to the League of Shadows.
Right.
They kicked him out.
But
Right.
he does.
Which
I
they
mean,
mention.
in that fight
Does he?
scene. Well, in that fight scene, he's like, we are members of the League of Shadows.
I feel like he's saying that.
He said, I am the League of Shadows.
Right.
Yeah.
But isn't that...
And you betrayed us.
A psychopath.
But at that time, isn't he speaking as Talia?
I thought he was...
Because, like, at the child of Ra's al Ghul.
Right. I thought it was things that you say in order to get people to go along with what you think you want them to do. That's what I thought it was.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, I'm supposed to make this guy think that I'm not going to rob the bank, so I'm going to say I'm not going to rob the bank. And then you
Yeah.
rob the bank.
So he's just trying to convince Bruce Wayne more and more
Right, yeah.
of who he is.
That's what I thought that's what that scene was about. But yeah, at the end of the day, where it's like, yeah, there's so much flip-flopping, you're kind of like, whoa, wait, what?
So that legend that they told in the hole, like
Right.
they were telling about Bane, did they know?
Well, they
it was-
don't like specifically say that it's about Bane. Batman, Bruce assumes that after the hallucination that
Okay.
he has.
Right, yeah,
He's like, oh, it must be Bane.
right.
They just say, this is Bane's prison. We shouldn't talk about this.
Yeah, but they don't say like this is his story. But he does tell the story about the kid who jumped out, but he doesn't say.
But it's not in that context
Yeah.
of like being about Bane.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, what is his motivation?
I don't know.
I just think he's working for Talia. Like,
He's just totally loyal to Talia.
yeah.
Because it seems to be more than just that. It seems to be like a real, not only just like loyal to Talia, but yeah, a literal attachment. It's kind of like he's doing it for personal reasons.
In the comics, or in some of the comics at least, more modern renditions of Bane, he does play like this sort of protector character where he attaches onto someone.
You mean like how he attaches onto Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin?
Yeah, like
Exactly.
He's kind of like the hired muscle.
Well, I think it's beyond him being hired muscle to the point of like him like fully believing in a cause.
Okay.
He 100% dedicates himself to this other person.
Because in Dark Knight Rises in particular, I feel like he's just kind of the maybe like red herring. He's the figurehead. He wants people to believe like
exactly.
this is really my plan, and this is it. Because Talia isn't really Talia. Talia is this other person.
Right.
Right. Okay. So he'll take all the heat because he can deal with it. That type of thing.
Yeah, I think he's the weakest villain.
Well, that's why I was really concerned when they announced that it was going to be him. I was like, oh, really? It's like, you know.
Bane's one of the newer villains that came out. He came out in the early 90s, right? In the comics, so...
It was kind of like around that same time of the death of Superman, and they kind of needed something around that same time. I was like, well, what's going to happen to Batman? Well, Batman's going to be crippled. So
And what came out in 93, 94.
Mm-hmm. I always thought that was weird that both Superman and Batman were really like hung up on these giant guys. Like Doomsday was just this big guy with bony hands. Like that killed Superman.
Well, I thought Doomsday had some sort of inherent kryptonite power
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
that allowed him to rough up Superman.
I just thought that was so, like, I guess, yeah, this big guy beat him to death, I suppose. And that was kind of pretty much what happened, like, in Nightfall, at least that first part. Like, Bruce Wayne's so exhausted, and eventually his body...
But that's all due to, you know, Bane releasing all these prisoners and Bane doing all this stuff that sort of forces Batman
his
to a breaking
physical,
point
yeah.
for his body,
Yeah.
but then he breaks his soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of happens in like reverse order in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He destroys Batman first, and then he destroys Gotham.
Mm-hmm.
Or tries to destroy Gotham.
Yeah. No, he messes it up pretty bad. They're going to be rebuilding for a while.
But no, I mean, he like unleashes Arkham and Blackgate in Nightfall and
yeah.
tons of supervillains, and it's pretty crazy.
Bane was in the animated series too. I never really imagined what he would sound like, but I never imagined him sounding like
Bane
that.
in the animated series was kind of lame. It's interesting because they were trying to do a little bit which was in the comics, which was Bane researched Batman and figured out how to exploit Batman's weaknesses. They did that a little bit in the series, but ultimately they just made him a pro wrestler,
Right.
who said, "I break you," and he had a Hispanic accent because the original Bane's supposed to be from Latin America.
Correct.
Or something like that.
So where is this? That's what I was always curious about. Like, where was this Bane supposed to be from?
Pakistan. Or something?
Well, sometimes the accent is kind of Irish or Scottish, and then sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's kind of vaguely other. Like, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'd like to know where that came from. Like, was it all Tom Hardy who came up with it? Or was it a lot of development? Like, let's try all these different voices?
Well, he had another voice before they changed it after the first trailer.
Because they couldn't understand him.
In the first trailer that they released to show off the new IMAX
Oh,
thing,
you mean the preview? It wasn't a trailer.
Yeah.
It was like a preview.
Teaser
It was the
thing.
plane scene from the
yeah,
beginning.
they basically showed the plane scene, and and I saw a YouTube thing where they were showing us a side-by-side comparison of what was in the theatrical release and what was in that preview. And yeah, no one could understand what he was saying, so they made him a little more audible, or they made him a little more clear.
Well, he's definitely like front and center in the mix. Like, when you're watching it at home, you're not missing it. It's like it's everywhere. It's like out of all speakers.
Which ultimately kind of worked, I think, in the end. It made him very strong and powerful and gave him this overwhelming presence.
He's a force of nature, basically. Yeah, like he's supposed to be this overwhelming force. So that in its own way, it helps kind of enforce that, the way that he sounds.
I think
the way he is.
you really need to buy into that to buy into the whole takeover of Gotham at the end, because you have to buy into that. They saw him at that stadium and they were just like, oh my god, this guy's in control. I mean, he had the bomb and everything too. So we can all kind of agree we like the first one. Steve, you think that's the best one.
Yeah.
And the rest of us,
Just
I believe,
in terms of the basic architecture of what makes a great story, Batman Begins succeeds in that.
And is that because it is character based?
Yeah.
I mean, that's my theory, is that
Yeah.
people really respond to this idea of Bruce Wayne being a person, right? He isn't the super genius Batman. He's not the Sherlock Holmes Batman that has everything figured out. He's a person with motivations.
He was a rich kid
Yeah.
that was brought down to size and then had to reinvent himself and use his reinvention for a greater good.
Right. And his money, his money. Yeah.
me, David, and Joseph, I think all think The Dark Knight is probably the best one.
It's definitely one that you could just pick up and watch. I think that's kind of something I think is really admirable about it.
It moves at a very
The
good
pacing
pace.
is incredible.
Yeah.
It's so tight. Like, every single scene is relevant
it doesn't
and
move
interesting.
too fast either. You
No.
can just keep pace with the movie as it's going along. Even though I think Batman Begins is a superior movie, the greatest scene is the standoff between the Joker and the Batman in the middle of the city.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
My favorite scene in The Dark Knight is the interrogation scene. I think that every time I watch that movie, that's when I remember, oh yeah, this is why Heath Ledger was so amazing.
Yeah.
Like, this scene totally...
Oddly
shows
enough,
it,
that's kind of roughly probably in the same kind of place in the movie too, similar to that interrogation scene, is the confrontation between Bane and Batman in Dark Knight Rises. That's where I feel like, whoa, like this is really where the movie's taken. That's
We
probably like an
never had
hour
anything
in.
as juicy
Yeah.
as that with Bane and Batman, though, because it's so amazing, that interrogation scene, Joker lets Batman know that Dent and what's the girlfriend's name again?
Rachel Dawes.
Rachel, their lives are on the line, and all Batman can do is just scream and keep punching him, and the Joker just keeps laughing back at him. Batman, as amazing as he was up to this point, is now at a very powerless
Mm-hmm.
and vulnerable place. And
We
it's
s-
only by Joker's good graces that he gives him a clue. It's ultimately wrong. But that's just by his own grace. He's like, oh, no, I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyway. And Joker's officially the most powerful villain in Gotham City, or in the world of that Batman, because he has this amazing power to keep being beaten up, and yet he's not afraid, and he's totally in control of everything. And that's that part. And plus, what makes it also so great is that's when his theme song comes in and it gets a lot.
Oh yeah, the score for Dark Knight's really great.
And that's like the madness is beginning to envelop on top of itself, and we're getting really crazy. He's pounding. He just keeps going. Ah! It's like officially we've gone over now, and now we're officially in this realm of true discomfort of wow, we don't have a real control over what's going on here. It's this madman that we're at the mercy of.
And they kind of try to play that same note when, like you were saying, in the scene in Dark Knight Rises where Bane beats up Batman. It's like his brawn, all he has doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, what else is he going to do?
Yeah.
But then at the end of Dark Knight Rises, he just punches him some more. And that's how he wins.
Well, I mean, during their first fight in the sewer, Batman tries putting the lights out, and he tries his little smoke bombs, and so yeah, I mean, it's not just his brawn that doesn't work. It's everything that sort of made
Everything
him
that
Batman in the first movie.
yeah.
The illusions and the fear and the trickery and the darkness.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so he did try a little bit more.
I think the character's coming from a different place too, because I think that's what that scene is in there too with Alfred, where it's like, you know, what about this guy? This guy has the same training that you do, da 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 da, and he's stronger and blah blah blah.
His
It's
ferocity.
Like, his
Well, I mean, we actually
meanness.
it reminded me of the Dark Knight Returns when he has to
Right.
fight the mutant leader. You know, and he just thinks it's about his ferocity. It's about his own ego of like his ability to win. You know,
Exactly,
I'll
yeah.
just fight harder like I always do.
That's
I'm,
what I was
I'm
going to
fucking
bring up.
Batman.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. It's kind of like, well, I don't know. You really haven't quite faced this before, and you're not in the same position that you were in this. You know, what was the first film a few years ago? Like you're kind of a little worse for wear. You know.
Yeah, and I made fun of the end, but he does get stronger in the cave, and he does learn about his mask, and he focuses more on punching him in the mask at the end. So he learns a little bit and puts that to use.
Definitely. But ultimately, it just ends up, Bane just needs to be shot. That's all.
Bane can't be killed by punching. No amount of punching will defeat this man.
Yeah, that was hard for me to take watching it the first time.
It was a disappointing.
After everything that we brought, all we need to have is Catwoman riding in on Deus Ex Machina bike and just.
Yeah.
And then she says a little one-liner. Am I really supposed to go, yeah, at this point? Really?
Yes. Yes. You're supposed to be there at midnight, and yeah, just go.
Yeah,
cheering.
it was a
Well,
disappointing.
no,
death.
I think you're then supposed to think like, oh, holy shit! Like, what about the bomb?
Right. Yeah.
You know,
There's so much.
because
going
at
on.
that point, I think you're supposed to be under the impression that Bane was a ruse. That like none of that mattered.
That would
And
work too if
even
they did
and
it
even
right,
how
though.
Talia tells Bane like, don't kill him. Like let the bomb kill him. Like let him feel the flames. As soon as she leaves, he's like, oh buddy, you know I'm not as into this whole scheme as she is.
Right, he was
like,
prepared to kill him.
I'm fucking pissed at you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah. Exactly.
Does The Dark Knight Rises touch upon the Occupy Wall Street movement?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about bringing the rich people to trial. They're
Completely.
shooting up what is supposed to be the Gotham City version of what is the big room where all the trading's going on? The
Wall Street.
Wall Street Stock Exchange.
Yeah. And so they're shooting up that place. They bring the rich people to trial.
The thing that it reminded me of is French Revolution, actually. Like I think there's a lot of cues to that. So yeah, it touches on like the Occupy Wall Street and kind of a lot of things that are going on right now, which is what makes it relevant to audiences now. But that's what it reminded me.
But all of that, I thought, was just a big ruse. Again, you know, like that all of that was stuff that, as audience members, we would be like, oh, I see these themes. Like I see what's going on here. Like, oh, I see this, I understand this revolution. Like it makes sense. But then, you know, at the end, you find out
what's motivating it is
right,
Yeah.
which is, you know,
Yeah. Definitely.
kind of it's a hard turn.
It's a sudden hard. Well, there's several sudden hard turns towards the end, but you know.
I don't mind that though. I just don't think it was done as effectively as I think they wish it would have happened. I think actually Metal Gear Solid 2 pulled that off a little bit better. Like, oh, Big Shell, the president, all this stuff is going on. Really, we're just boiling it down to just a thematic question about what is reality and how do you believe in what you believe in and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, ultimately, The Dark Knight, because it gets so caught up in that spectacle, it kind of gets lost within its own spectacle and doesn't take a step back and try to repackage it just nice for the audience.
There must be just like so much pressure because you don't want to disappoint the audience, right? And you want to make sure that there's something bigger and better than what they saw before, and that's kind of tough to top The Dark Knight in that way. In terms of making just a pure Batman thriller that isn't necessarily thematically driven, it's like, well, that's really tough to
Which
top.
reminds me of the quote at the end of the first movie when Gordon is talking to Batman. And he's like, oh, we start wearing bulletproof vests and they get armor-piercing rounds. And it's just that same escalation. You can see it in the movies.
Just in the movies, yeah, like the stakes get higher and higher.
The audience wants more.
Yeah.
And I feel like they did a good job of that because The Dark Knight Rises does feel bigger and better, but not like bigger and betterer. It's not like, it's not so ridiculous. Like they don't go into space and they don't do crazy things like that, but there is like a nuclear bomb and it's about like the end of this whole city and there's a lot more at stake, but it didn't feel like it was trying really hard to like push it to the next level.
But I mean, the first movie is also about the whole city.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the first and the third really parallel each other.
That's true. I forget about that a lot. That there is like that doomsday thing at that whole
like the
thing.
whole point of the first movie is that Gotham is corrupt.
Yeah. And you know what? That's why I think Batman Begins succeeds, because ultimately the fate of Gotham City being destroyed is at stake, but that's not what the movie is ultimately about.
It's just, I think in all three, like basically the population of Gotham City is pretty much just held hostage. Like they're pretty much in between this billionaire in a bat suit and whatever crazy person wants to take them on. Like they're constantly just in the middle of all of this, which I think you get a better idea of in the first two, maybe necessarily than the third one.
And I think that all three movies do a good job of raising the question of whether or not the city is worth saving.
True.
Like, why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, that's also what that Bane does, but I don't think the movie took the time to enforce this. That I've now exposed to you that this city's not worth saving because I gave them anarchy, and they're already putting rich people on trial and stuff like that. I mean, really, Gotham City is full of fuck faces ultimately, and because he gave them anarchy, and they were like, all right, we're going to be anarchists now, or something like that, and. Yeah, Gotham City is reduced to a very deplorable city, and there's a few good ones in there, I guess, but...
Gotham City sometimes, especially in The Dark Knight Rises, kind of reminds me of like Springfield or something. Like the whole town is like so easily, swayed.
Monorail.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Bane just has to go up there and read some note, and they're all like, "Yeah."
Nobody's like, "Can we check those references?"
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but if you look at the reaction shots when he's reading that letter from Gordon. They're all from inside Blackgate.
Yeah.
So it seems like what he's doing is just getting all the Blackgate prisoners riled up to,
They do mention that because they're like, oh, there was tons of criminals that were put away because of the Dent Act, and it was based on
thousands
a lie.
of criminals who are now like really pissed and well armed.
Right.
So I felt like it was it wasn't as much of like poor people in Gotham rising up, but like the crime community is revitalized by Bane.
Yeah, completely.
Both in the sewers and then from Blackgate.
And just whoever else is running around the streets.
Exactly.
What I appreciate out of all three films the most is how they kind of reappropriate established stories and pretty well-known stories that were already in the books. And they reappropriate them. Sometimes they'll take like 3 or 4 storylines in the books and get them to work together. Like, for example... when I heard about Two-Face was going to be in Dark Knight, I was kind of like, I was kind of worried about that because I thought the Two-Face story in the animated series was so great.
Yeah.
And it was handled in such a great way, such a human way. And I was like, I don't know if I want him to be like second fiddle and they try to do all these things in one movie. But they did it great. They found a way to make it work. Mm-hmm. And you could make a Two-Face movie that would be just a Two-Face movie. But they found a way to have both of those villains in there that serve the story.
Yeah. And you can understand why Two-Face and the Joker intertwine, because the Joker's the one that introduces Two-Face to his new philosophy of looking at life as in terms of chaos is fair.
And they get it to work. They actually, all three movies managed to kind of do that storytelling judo pretty well, where it's like, well, how do you get two characters that are pretty different, Ra's al Ghul and the Scarecrow, together? Like, how do you get them and working together and having that fit thematically? Well, they do it great.
Yeah.
They do it great.
Right.
And yeah, there's just so many different... It's kind of like in the way of the animated series that you appreciate, is you see when they'll take a story, like in the animated series, The Laughing Fish was a storyline from the 70s. They took that, reappropriated that, and make that into its own great new story. Or reappropriating Mr. Freeze and totally reinventing Mr.
Freeze is a great villain.
Oh, absolutely.
Because,
Arkham City.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
In the animated series, Freeze was such a great villain because, again, cutting back to delicious themes I love to chew on, his weaponry is freeze, and this is also a guy that's frozen in time with his love, which is in the cryogenic. She's stuck too, and so is he. He can't mourn her, and he can't bring her back.
His emotions are frozen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
As well
a
as
guy
his
who's
body.
literally frozen thematically and literally.
Definitely.
Such a great villain.
Definitely.
Which is something they try to incorporate into Batman and Robin.
Unsuccessful. That was well. I guess maybe that's why I was so worried about Two-Face and Dark Knight, is because I was still remembering Batman and Robin, because I was after Heart of Ice and stuff like that. When you hear about the next villain is going to be Mr. Freeze, you're like, oh great, well they're going to use the Paul Dini story and it's going to be this great character-driven thing, and da 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 da. And it's like, no, it has nothing to do with anything. It's basically just a '60s Batman show with Freeze puns,
And
and
now he's got like white cigars and
Yeah,
red
like-
slippers and
it's just
What's
so...
he doing with his ice honey? With
Vivica A. Fox.
Vivica A. Fox in her sexy ice thing with the poofy things around there. I thought you loved your wife or something like that.
Well, no,
That's a really
he
good
does.
point.
No, there's a point in the movie where he says something. My heart belongs to another.
So what?
It's a
Don't
cold
you-
But it's
pun,
still
but I
it's
don't
still
know.
just like, oh, imagine Two-Face, but his guns shoot ice lasers.
Yeah.
Like that's like
But still-
basically what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's just the shallowness of the fact that she has to dress like a ice whore. You know.
But Tommy Lee Jones had his two
the sweet and
Oh,
sour.
two sweet and
in
sour
the room,
ones.
one lady lights his cigarette all nice, and the other lady uses a blowtorch.
Right.
And his whole room is separated into two
Yeah,
colors.
just that. Well, I mean, that was also... I think they mentioned that in the animated series, too, which was from the comics, where it's like... Two-Face is also obsessed. He's obsessed with two,
Yeah.
Like, that would be something that you would see in his crimes. Like, I think in the animated series, he robs the Second National Bank or something like
what
that.
was cool about the Two-Face in the animated series is that Harvey Dent and Two-Face were literally two personas that lived within
It was
him.
a split personality.
There was a really great scene
Yeah.
where Harvey Dent is talking to a psychologist or something like that, and she's asking him questions, and all of a sudden she talks to Two-Face, and all of a sudden she's talking to Two-Face, and Two-Face is talking about Harvey Dent.
Right.
And Two-Face saying, Harvey Dent's a loser, he's not going anywhere, he doesn't have what it takes to make it. And there's a really cool scene. This is just an aesthetic thing that I like, but lightning flashed, and when the lightning flashed on Harvey Dent's face, the Two-Face
Was there.
for one frame, you see the light
Yeah.
hitting it. It's like, ugh.
Well, yeah,
It's
they-
so cool.
Well, and they tried to do that in Batman and Robin, where he has like the two personalities, but it's just him going like, "Well, I want to do this, and so do I."
Oh
Like,
yeah,
it's-
in Batman Forever. It's
Batman Forever.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah, like and me and me. It's like, well, that's Two-Face, all right. But think about how Bane was reappropriated in Dark Knight Rises. Like, that's a character who's like, I don't know. Like, he's brains and brawn and da 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 da. It's like, how are they going to make it work? And they found a way to kind of reappropriate him and reappropriate the story of Nightfall into this way that's supposed to wrap up these three movies, the Nolan movies, where it's kind of like, all right, this is the capper.
Well, and do you think that to appreciate the Nolan movies, you have to kind of know the comics and know what he's doing with these characters
don't
to
think
really
so.
like them, or can you
No.
go into them
No,
knowing
you
nothing
don't.
about
I
them
don't
at
think
all?
so.
You don't have to know a
I
single
think that's
thing.
why the Nolan movies are so good, is because it's not required reading to read the comics first. They stand on their own,
I would hope so.
And even if you don't know who Batman is, the first movie's an amazing origin story.
Yeah.
But everyone knows who Batman is, and everyone knows who the Joker is.
Yeah. I mean, out of all superheroes, probably Superman and Batman, even if you've never read a comic, like, oh, this is where they're from and this is what happened, and, even if you've never seen any of the movies. you
Yeah,
kinda
and Spider-Man,
Yeah. Which is why they had to reboot Spider-Man instantly. So,
Well, I thought that was for copyright issues.
probably, yeah.
I thought like they were gonna lose their copyright if they didn't use the IP, and that's why that new Spider-Man was made.
Well, speaking of losing the IP, what do you think is next for Batman?
Sounds like Justice League.
Justice League.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Which
bad.
I can't picture. I
That
can't picture
sucks.
at all what it's gonna look
That's
like.
where Batman becomes less interesting when he has to work with a group of
No,
Unless-
I disagree. I think Batman is most interesting when he's working with the Justice League because he sort of goes off and does his own thing where he's, 12 steps ahead of them and then sort of circles around at the end with his own plot and is like, oh, by the way, I figured all this out. Like, I'm here to save the day because I'm the fucking Batman.
You could also approach it
Yeah.
in a way that I think they have been recently, like in the past 10 or 15 years, where it's like, because that was what always bothered me, is like, well, why would Bruce Wayne go along with this super group of superheroes? Like, that seems really weird. He's kind of a loner. And he sticks around to kind of keep tabs on them, because he's kind of like, well, these guys have all the power in the world, basically. It's like, I better see what they're doing. So maybe if you kind of
Right.
took that angle, you could
Okay,
see.
so maybe what if the Justice League movie started with Batman facing just like a full-on supervillain, like
Right.
someone with powers that just wallops his ass,
Like Darkseid or something?
and then he becomes like extremely paranoid about superhuman individuals, regardless of what side they're on.
Yeah, that would be a way to get it to work. It's just like my problem is like what are you going to come up with to that this entire league, this Justice League is going to have to face? Like, are Joker and Lex Luthor going to team up and get robot suits or something? Like what could it be? What could it possibly be?
I think the
just-
OMAC project would be cool.
Okay. I mean, there's so much that you'd have to establish. That's the other thing
Yeah.
too. Is like, well, how far are they going to go? Is it the Man of Steel Superman going to be in Justice League?
Well, I think so. I think the new Krypton would be a really cool like if they incorporated the Justice League into that. I think that'd be really awesome.
And Ryan Reynolds, like, is Hal Jordan going to be?
Ay, ay, ay.
No.
I hope not. I hope they just
Fuck
recast that.
I mean, you kind of really have to start from square one and just kind of be like, hey, there's all these superheroes. Just go with it. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I don't see why we can't have older superheroes.
Okay.
Like at least someone on the league who's maybe in their like Green Lantern could be, Nathan Fillion could still play him like
Okay.
as like a, late 30s sort of.
Have a little gray at the temples.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. No, I mean, we'd like to see a Justice League movie where they just trust the audience a little bit.
Yeah.
And just go, look, here are these characters. You know who they are. Now let's go on an adventure. Like,
And do you want to see like a team of like, oh no, I'm the best. No, I'm the best. I'm a superhero. You're not a superhero. I'm the superhero. Like,
Well, I thought the Avengers did that pretty well.
but the Avengers worked in a whole nother reality, in like a more comic booky reality, if
Sure.
you will, and it worked really well on that like level. But I don't know. I can't picture Justice League being like Avengers at all.
No, it would have to be a totally different tone. I mean, again, unless you make it like some sort of period piece or something. I don't know. Does it take place in the 40s or something?
And then that would still be awful. Like I just don't.
Well, I don't know.
I
Maybe they need the Justice League to fight Hitler or something. I don't know.
I don't see how it could be good.
I don't. They really want to do it though, so I imagine that that'll be the next one. They would be smart to kind of wait a little while to kind of see which direction they
Well,
want to go.
I think they said they're rebooting Batman
Like
with,
immediately?
with the Justice League
Oh,
movie.
okay. So I don't know.
I would like to see a sort of like Batman and Robin, the comic Batman, with like the sleek car and cloth suit, where he's like more detective-y, and I don't know.
But see, the problem with that is that you would waste an entire movie on establishing Batman again and who Robin is, and like which Robin is it going to be? Tim,
No,
Tim
not
Drake?
the Robin wasn't included. I just mean that style of Batman.
Oh, that's style. Okay. So-
Like that's the Batman that Joseph Gordon-Levitt could pull off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another good question. Is Joseph Gordon-Levitt going to be Batman in the Justice League movie?
Well, there was that whole rumor recently that was shot down, but that doesn't mean
That it's not
gonna
happening.
happen. Yeah.
They shot down that Talia was in Dark Knight Rises too. We all knew.
Yeah.
We knew it was Talia. Come on.
I think Taylor Kitsch should be Batman.
That's interesting.
Like, have you seen Savages?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah.
I didn't like it at all.
I mean-
I read the book before, but like the look that he has in Savages, I think would make an interesting young Batman sort of character.
Of course.
I feel you.
Like young and tough, but still like focused.
I mean, I guess that would be a way to kind of do another take. I mean, you could do the Genius Batman. That would be another way to go now that they've done the
Yeah.
kind of quasi-realistic
I mean,
one.
that could be the Genius Batman.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because he just has like that really focused, I'm gonna murder you with my mind sort of aesthetic going on, and I think that could work. If you do like a young Superman, young Batman, older Green Lantern, older Wonder Woman, or I don't know. I just think there should be older like variation in the ages of the characters to
Have some sort of
to
leaders.
differ and to like differentiate them, you know,
Yeah, that they're not all like 22 years old.
like like gung ho badasses.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's probably going to be an origin of the Justice League movie, and that's going to be kind of boring.
Fully boring, and that's why Avengers is amazing, because you know they built a sort of platform to jump off of, and
Would the Avengers movie work as
tell.
much if we didn't have those other movies before it, though?
No.
It wouldn't work as well.
I think
So
that,
that's why they can't make a Justice League movie just starting.
right. I think
That's why
that
they got to make all these,
No, but-
establishment movies.
I disagree. I think that they should just give the audience credit to know who Batman and Superman and whatever are.
I would be happy to go along with the movie that just started where they're all in the big round table.
And that's why I think they should do Identity Crisis or OMAC, like something that sort of picks up from a spot where you can get understand what's going on, but then not have to waste any time on exposition for the characters or.
because really, like, if you have to say, like, oh yeah, by the way, this Bruce Wayne, he had his parents killed. Like the idea that that's that Batman, or it's like I am obsessed. Oh, let's go with these superheroes. Like, it's
Or it's
so
gonna be like,
weird.
listen, pal, I don't care about your parents.
Yeah.
This is the whole world. It's like, fuck, it's gonna be miserable.
Yeah, it's just going to be bad.
I just want to know if Wonder Woman's gonna have an invisible plane. That's all I care about.
To kind of wrap things up, how do you guys feel that the Christopher Nolan Batman movies fit in to the whole Batman movie saga?
Oh, I mean, and like, are we trying to rank them?
If you will.
They're
I think
the top
in
three.
my book, it's the only Batman saga. I don't even think that the Burton movies are that great.
No?
No.
I think the Batman. I feel like the Tim Burton Batmans hold up pretty well in terms of things. It is a more fantastical Batman for sure. It's kind of a more like fairy tale Gotham and everything like that. But I don't know. I still really hang on to Batman Returns for just kind of like how dark it is.
I really feel like Tim Burton's Batmans have their place, and they really kind of have it has it set up, and it has its whole little world, and it kind of lives inside that. You go to the Schumacher ones, which are total crap, and are just there to make toys and money, and you can kind of forget about those. And then you have the Nolan ones, which are again in their own world and their own time and place. It's like that's what they were meant for. It was supposed to be a reboot of Batman.
Well, and I think that Batman's been around for 70 years or 80 years or something now, 60 years.
40 years.
Somewhere between now and 80 years ago, Batman was created.
Yeah, the first comic was when? 40s, right?
39.
Oh, I didn't know. Whoa, I didn't know.
Yeah,
Wow,
Detective
wow,
Comics.
Wow, I didn't know.
Yeah,
So it's been through a lot of
pre
different.
World War II. I didn't know
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
pre-World War II.
Yeah, so it's gone from the dark origin to the camp to the dark origin.
No,
again
it didn't
to,
have a dark origin though.
Well,
It was
the,
pretty goofy.
Yeah.
The first Batman
It
comics.
did carry a gun.
Yeah, but I mean, it was just.
We're talking 1930s,
Kind of more pulp.
sensibilities and
Everyone had
stuff
a
like
gun.
Everybody had a gun. Well, it was more pulp based.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah. But I mean, the character of Batman has been interpreted in so many ways in the comics, and so many of them are as terrible as the Schumacher movies, or as weird as the Burton movies.
Yeah, I mean, there's
or
one
as
part where
as serious.
Batman and Robin had to fight a rainbow monster.
Yeah, or like as serious as the Nolan movies. That it kind of fits that the movies are as different as the comics.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I just hope that the Nolan
If
movies.
we're going to talk about the Batman saga, we got to include that animated series, though, because I think the animated series is amazing.
Yeah,
Well,
completely.
you can, but I mean, it's looking at movies versus TV.
Well, there was Mask of the
But the
Phantasm.
animated series.
Mask
did
of the
make-
Phantasm.
Mask
big
of
impact.
Phantasm is a great movie. Though.
Have you guys seen the
Love
Return
Mask
of the
of the
Joker, the Batman Beyond movie? That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty good too. Yeah, all the animated ones kind of stand up really well. I just hope that with the Nolan movies, I hope that it kind of gets more people into the character. Like, I don't know if kids can watch the Nolan movies and get into them like I did with the Tim Burton movies.
No.
And the Tim Burton movies, like, even though I watched the 60s show on reruns and stuff like that, I definitely knew who the character was. Like, man, it was a big deal when the first Tim Burton Batman movie came out. It was such a phenomenon. And, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be like that for kids, if people are going to get into the comics or anything else.
Well, I mean, there's, Brave and the Bold and like a whole plethora of age groups for Batman entertainment.
There's that WB one,
Batman.
Batman.
But like my neighbor has kids that are like 5 and 8, and they can't watch these movies because they're fucking terrified of them.
Okay.
Okay. Heath Ledger is scary.
Okay. Well, that answers that. Well, yeah, it's just, I guess, but that's one of the things that I kind of hold dear about Batman, is that's one of the few things that is allowed to kind of grow up with you in a weird way. Like, you see different things in the character and the situations and all of the different settings as you grow up. Like, probably as a kid you I think I identified more with Robin. Like, so that's why I would like those stories and like the 60s Batman shows. I guess he's kind of closer to your age, and Batman would be more of the father figure. But now you relate more to Bruce Wayne. Like, you just, it's so weird. Like, you have all of these
and Robin is dumb and
yeah, exactly. You're like, God, Robin, shut up. Like, you would throttle him. You're just like, shut up. Jason Todd.
Nobody likes Jason Todd. Kill that kid.
I don't know how, well, as an aside, I don't know how you could fit this in, but I really like the whole idea of Damian as Robin.
Me too, and I also really like the Arkham City costume for Robin, which they kind of riff on in the Batman and Robin, where he has the hood and the cape.
Yeah. Or it's like Teen Titans, right? Doesn't he kind of have that a little bit, like the hood?
I haven't read any comics in over a year, but I think it's a really cool aesthetic and like could work for sure.
Yeah, or kind of this idea, because it plays on that idea of why Batman took in Robin for the first place, is to kind of look out for this kid and not have him become a supervillain. Well, Damian already kind of is a supervillain. He was trained by the League of Assassins, and he is a killer. And it's like him trying to kind of keep that under control is really interesting. But maybe we'll get to see that sometime. Maybe like in the animated universe or something. But I don't know. I just hope that it gets people into the comics. I think that's the best thing that a good comic movie can do, is like, oh, like I like these characters. I want to check out these other stories.
I kind of like to see the Christopher Nolan movies as sort of the cap on this current incarnation of Batman, and now it's time to reinvent Batman again.
Bring in new writers, new artists, right? That type of thing. Yeah. Definitely.
Because for whatever reason, the movie is kind of like the end goal for any intellectual property, it seems, and now we've got that movie and it's all finished and this trilogy's done, so like now it's time to do it again, and we'll see what happens. But
so bring Batman back to the 30s. That's the only thing.
Can we agree that it was done right, and we are all satisfied?
Yeah, we have tons of things that we make fun of, but I mean, I don't know how you could be disappointed by any of the three.
I don't know how you could see Dark Knight Rises in the theater and not be just totally blown away.
Just by the spectacle, if nothing else.
Spectacle alone.
The craft of the movie. There are some odd things, but it's just how they're made. It's thematically and everything like that. I think that they stand up. If you look at them as a trilogy, if you can, it's the idea of, to harp on it again, it's the idea of Bruce Wayne as a human being, and like the network that it would take to set up something.
And that's why
like
it ultimately succeeds.
Yeah, it's a human story.
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
Human story. That's not to say you can't.
That's what I look for as an audience member. That's what I want to latch onto and go along with.
And it's pretty amazing that this
So
character can support that, really.
Is that what you want from Superman? From this new Superman?
Boy, that's
Like,
tough.
do you want him to be a human being that you can...
Superman's not a human being, though.
Yeah,
That's a
No,
good
I-
point. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
I know,
Fuck you.
but I'm saying that's the problem. Like,
No, I think I want... What I would
I
want
would
from
like
this...
what I would like to see is, you see, Superman may have come from Krypton, but he ultimately wants to fit in with society. His powers are what keeps him at a distance from the human race, which is the only family he knows and the only people he wants to associate himself with. And his powers are that which makes him able to save the city, but the same thing that distances himself from regular human beings that he just wants to be along with.
but didn't they already?
So
do
what
that?
would be interesting is like to see Clark Kent, or like Bill said, Clark Kent is the costume, but to see him try to really be Clark Kent and to see it not work out and to have him have to deal with the fact that he's Superman. He's got to be Superman.
I can tell you
That is what I would look for me as a personal audience member, is to want to see him trying to wrestle with the fact that he has to be the Man of Steel. Because if he's just like, I'm Superman, Truth, Justice, American Way, that's not interesting to me.
But I think, if I recall correctly, the trailers had the trailer for that had two versions. One narrated by his his Kryptonian father, and then one by Kevin Costner, who I guess plays his adopted father.
Right.
Well, I can tell you
So
what...
I think it's going to be like an identity struggle for him. Like, oh, am I a human? Am I an alien? I don't know.
Okay.
Didn't they kind of do that in Superman 2 when he loses his powers and it's like that's the real Superman, is like who he is, not his powers.
It's a variation of it. But I mean, I can tell you what I don't want to see, and I don't want to see like the idea of the secret identity have really any part to play. Like, I don't want there to be like, oh, I hope they don't find out that I'm invulnerable.
Oh yeah, that would be awful.
You know what I mean? It's like, basically I want Superman to kind of fulfill the 5-year-old in me, which is like, I want to see him pick up cars, and I want him to throw it at like really super strong guys. I want him to like see him punch holes in walls and have a cape. That's pretty much what I want.
And that's why I think New Krypton would be the perfect story.
Okay.
Because it not only, what happens is the bottled city of
Kandor, yeah.
is,
So it's like a Brainiac story?
grabbed from Brainiac
Yeah.
and basically regrown on Earth. So all of a sudden there's 10,000 Kryptonians.
Oh.
And so, including like Clark's aunt and uncle, like Supergirl's parents, and so all of a sudden he is torn between like being a Kryptonian and being a human, like in a literal sense. But at the same time, there are now 10,000 people that can
Fight him.
match him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so and that freaks humans the fuck out. So then they like grab Zod from the Phantom Zone to be their leader. The Kryptonians do, because they don't know about all of his crimes. It's a really cool story.
That would be a pretty rad movie.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's kind of what you have to do. You kind of have to pit him against Kryptonians.
And then like
what
Lex
else do you do?
Luthor is fighting like a shadow war of like terrorism and stuff, like blaming it on the Kryptonians, but like terrorizing the humans in order to start a war and just really destroy Kryptonians.
Is he the president in this scenario?
No, he's
Okay.
not.
Is he a CEO of something?
Yeah, he's like Luthor Corp
Okay.
CEO, or is it LexCorp?
I think it's LexCorp.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
Dude, it's such a cool story. Like, you have to read it.
but it's like I guess that's what I'm just kind of curious about Man of Steel. But I mean, I don't know if it's going to be a melodrama like Smallville or something like that. But I guess if it's Zack Snyder, it can't be, right?
Yeah, it's gonna have to be a slow motion action epic.
But it
Yeah.
is produced by Chris Nolan, so...
It'll
Well,
be
that
curious.
can only mean so much.
Yeah,
when
but-
someone's a
But it could
producer.
mean something.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Snobcast. Please send feedback to the snobcastfeedback@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts, username The Snobcast.
I want a car. Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.